Now placed in a situation which you can act according to those sympathies which God has planted in your bosoms.
The Relief Society began with just 20 members, and by the end of the first year's meetings, over 1,100 women had joined. I think this is an indication of the great appeal of this society, an organization for women founded by the prophet. This was an exciting time for women. They flocked to this new group. Their problem was space. So by May of 1842, they had already decided that they were going to move to meeting in the Grove, meet out of doors where they could be addressed by Joseph, sometimes other priesthood leaders, and plan their charitable work. The meetings were suspended during the winter, obviously, because there wasn't going to be any place to meet. But when they got together again the next spring, Emma saw the wisdom in dividing into 4 separate groups according to the wards. Another thing that they could see was that they needed to systematize the charitable work. So in July of 1843, they organized visiting committees in each of the wards.
As Joseph Smith envisioned, greater things did come to the women of the church and have continued to come. This is now one of the largest organizations for women in the world, and it has become a great organization founded on the principles of the priesthood.
In the same year that the Relief Society was organized in Nauvoo, Joseph Smith sent a letter to the editor of a paper in Chicago by the name of John Wentworth. This Wentworth letter, as it's called, contained the 13 Articles of Faith. The 11th article states, "We claim the privilege of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our conscience, and allow all men the same privilege. Let them worship how, where, or what they may." This was instilled very deeply in Joseph's soul as a boy. He said he learned the love of liberty being raised on his grandparents' knees. Joseph said, "I am the greatest advocate of the Constitution," and although he was not able to get his fair trials in courts of law, Joseph still maintained that the Constitution was inspired of God.
Joseph, through his incarceration in Independence, Richmond, and Liberty Jail, learned the value of freedom. And he also very much valued religious freedom. He valued it not only for himself and his followers, but he held that same value whether the man was a Catholic, whether he was a Protestant, whatever faith that person had. He valued their right in the United States of America to have them have the right to worship who, when, where they might.
Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Nauvoo that the Catholics, Presbyterians, Methodists, Baptists, Latter-day Saints, Quakers, Episcopalians, Universalists, Unitarians, Mohammedans, and all other religious sects and denominations whatever shall have free toleration and equal privileges in this city. And should any person be guilty of ridiculing, abusing, or otherwise depreciating another in consequence of his religion, or of disturbing or interrupting any religious meeting within the limits of this city, he shall, on conviction thereof before the mayor or municipal court, be considered a disturber of the public peace.
Joseph really practiced what he preached. For example, on one occasion, a Methodist preacher by the name of Samuel Pryor came to town. And Joseph, to the surprise and delight of this minister, invited him to preach to the saints. Joseph asked Reverend Pryor if he might say a few words after he finished. Joseph stood and offered a few corrections, but he did it in such kindness that Reverend Pryor asked if he might submit an article to the Times and Season to let others know how kindly he was treated by the prophet Joseph.
The saints can testify whether I am willing to lay down my life for my brethren. It has been demonstrated that I have been willing to die for a Mormon. I am bold to declare before heaven that I am just as ready to die in defending the rights of a Presbyterian, a Baptist, or a good man of any other denomination. For the same principle which would trample upon the rights of the Latter-day Saints would trample upon the rights of the Roman Catholics or any other denomination who may be unpopular and too weak to defend themselves. It is love of liberty which inspires my soul. Civil and religious liberty to the whole of the human race. Love of liberty was diffused into my soul by grandfathers while they dandled me on their knees.
Joseph Smith had a tremendous love of liberty, but as the 1844 presidential election loomed on the horizon, he was still hoping that one of the candidates for the President of the United States would do something to help the Mormons in their petition for redress for the property that they'd lost in Missouri. So he wrote a letter to 5 of the leading candidates asking them what they would do to help the Mormons if they were elected. He wasn't satisfied with any of their responses. So in January 1844, Joseph Smith made the decision to run for President of the United States on an independent ticket. He and W.W. Phelps wrote a platform and had it published in a pamphlet entitled General Smith's Views of the Powers and Policy of the Government of the United States, and published 1,500 copies. In the April 1844 General Conference, the church called 340 missionaries to campaign for the prophet Joseph Smith, and they assigned them to campaign in all 26 states and the territory of Wisconsin. They also called most of the members of the Quorum of 12 Apostles to campaign. The only 2 that stayed behind were John Taylor and Willard Richards, who remained in Nauvoo. This missionary force was the largest missionary force in the history of the church up to that time. Back in 1834, they called 111 missionaries, but in 1844, they called 586 missionaries. It was the largest missionary force for the next 65 years of church history.
When the Saints moved to Nauvoo from Quincy, it was the law of the state of Illinois, in fact it was the law of the United States of America, that every male between the ages of 18 and 45, within 30 days of arrival in a new community, was to enlist in the state or the local militia. And so the Latter-day Saints, under Don Carlos Smith, who was Joseph Smith's younger brother, began to enlist in what was called the Illinois 59th Regiment. Now, it was also important that they do that because they would also have a sense of protection, because they had lost all their weapons and everything else when they left Missouri.
John C. Bennett was brought in to secure not only the charter, but to help organize the Legion. He had had considerable military experience and expertise, and could provide that very easily. And in cooperation with Joseph Smith, who was closely involved in the creation of the Legion, they developed a rank structure which included the rank of Lieutenant General, a 3-star general, which Joseph Smith held, which is a pretty impressive thing in that period of time.
As to the military station I hold, and the cause of my holding it, is as follows. When we came here, the state required us to bear arms and do military duty according to the law. The Saints came to me for advice, and I advised them to organize themselves into independent companies and demand arms of the state. This they did. I then told the Saints that though I was clear from military duty by law, in consequence of lameness of one of my legs, yet I would set the example and would do duty myself. They said they were willing to do duty if they would be formed into an independent company and I could be at their head. This is the origin of the Nauvoo Legion and of my holding office of Lieutenant General.
Eventually there were as many as 5,000 men involved in the Legion, and we had the image sometimes that this was just for parades and demonstrations and perhaps entertainment. But in fact, the Nauvoo Legion was used for military expeditions and was a serious enterprise in terms of the defense of Nauvoo.
The very first public appearance of this militia is on the 6th of April, 1840. Here they are at the temple at the dedication ceremony. Of course, Joseph Smith is speaking, and several hundred, if not 1,000 people are there. And some guests were there. Perhaps the most interesting guest was a man named Thomas C. Sharp. He knew what the Saints were up to. He could see the rise of Illinois. He came from a neighboring town just down the river.